上去。目标可以到普通，延迟普通。8%。Okay. It's good. Oh, 对 ，No problem， 直播就好了，有直播就好了。
What this triangle is supposed to mean, but probably has something to do with the Pythagorean theorem or something like that. I don't really know at this point. So how do you take your T triangle face
What the？ 睡觉再走好。摇不到了，北七。
Hello and welcome to Nightmare Masterclass. My name is David Stockdale. I'll be your host on this excursion into the dark unknown. This is the 5th part of my analysis on the enigmatic web series Petscop. And while the opening of this video might have been a bit of an exaggeration, you know, I haven't lost my grip on sanity quite yet, but this series has definitely left me scratching my head on many occasions. The 11th video came out last Christmas after months of radio silence from the channel. The 12th video came out not too long after that. And in March of this year, the 13th video was released. It's safe to say that there's plenty of new material to cover here, and I'm fairly confident in saying that my analysis will cover some new and compelling ground. As always, if you spot a mistake or just think my interpretation is wildly off base, feel free to discuss in the comments. Just a bit of housekeeping at the top of the hour here. A few people have asked me why I don't have a Patreon account. The reason is I don't think I'm currently in a position where Patreon will be a useful tool for me. I think I need a larger subscriber count for Patreon to really be worth the effort. Maybe somewhere down the line it will happen, but for the time being,
what the fuck?
If you enjoy my videos and
You
have a few
son of
bucks
a
to spare,
bitch.
I want you to please consider supporting me on Ko-fi.com/Nightmare Masterclass. Please know that your donations are highly appreciated. Your support enables me to continue doing what I do. But if you are at a point in your life where you think you can't make the expenditure, that is totally fine as well. There are other ways to support me. First and foremost, you can share my videos with anyone you think might be interested. And of course, you can like and subscribe to my channel. Be sure to turn notifications on so you'll be alerted when I upload a new video. And this is tangentially related, but I also want to announce that I'm starting up an Etsy shop with the aim of selling inspirational print. Here is my first product. It's an 8x12 print of a quote by Schopenhauer.
After your death, you will be what you were before your birth.
It's a great reminder to have around the house. So if you're looking for some exquisite decor, check it out. I'll have a link in the video description. Alright, so let's talk about Petscop. I must say that I've been a bit reticent to put out another video on Petscop because I do want to encourage viewers to watch the videos and come up with their own conclusions about this nightmarish internet puzzle. My goal here at Nightmare Masterclass is always to encourage critical thinking and, well, if I succumb to the massive pressure from my audience to put out a video as soon as possible after this new material came out, I feel like I wouldn't be giving you all enough time to really think about it for yourselves. And to be totally honest, I've needed some time to digest the material myself, but now, having gone over these 3 new videos with a fine-tooth comb, I am fairly confident in saying my approach towards this series is proving to bear fruit, as it were. Or at least I think so. In this installment, I'll be covering videos 11 through 13. And hear this noise, along with the word footnote, it means I'm taking a brief pause to note something peculiar. And be sure to stick around because I'll be doing a comprehensive analysis of this new material towards the end of the video. Before I get started, I just want to give a shout out to the Petscop subreddit and those who have contributed to the so-called comprehensive progress document. Their various findings and speculations have apprised this analysis in numerous ways. Seriously, if you are interested in looking into this for yourself, check out the progress document. It contains far more information than I could possibly hope to relay in one of my videos. I'll have a link in the video description. Now, as always, I strongly encourage you to watch the series for yourself before watching my videos on the topic. You're really doing yourself a disservice if you choose not to do so. And if you haven't seen my previous videos in the investigation series, I'd suggest starting with part 1. But you know, I'm going to go ahead and assume that most of my audience watched those videos quite some time ago. So here's a little refresher. Paul, our protagonist, is a young man who's happened upon an old PlayStation game by the name of Petscop. Increasingly, it seems as though the game is getting rather cryptic. Moreover, it seems as though there have been some shenanigans happening with the Petscop YouTube channel. Paul seems to have lost control of the channel, and a mysterious group who we'll refer to as the Proprietors has taken ownership. More on that in a minute. Now, occasionally Paul comes across notes in the game signed by someone named Rainer. I suspect that this Rainer referenced in the game is, in actuality, the person who designed Petscop. I stated in my previous installment that I think Rainer is either a witness or perhaps even complicit in certain heinous crimes that are vaguely alluded to in the game itself. I've speculated that perhaps the purpose of the game Petscop is indeed to expose these crimes, or at least document them to a select audience. I believe these crimes were either committed or facilitated by the group of people who maintain the YouTube channel. Again, people I've previously referred to as the Proprietors. Keep in mind that I'm referring to the fictional universe of Petscop here. Prior to the 11th video's publication, the channel icon was changed back to an image of Paul's avatar, leading many to believe new material was imminent. That proved to be correct. Petscop 11 dropped on Christmas Day, December 25th, 2017. And what a gift it was. At 29 minutes and 31 seconds, it is the longest video to date. The channel description was updated around that time as well. It currently reads as follows. Everything we wish to say is below. The purpose of this YouTube channel is to preserve and display the recordings within the video game Petscop while keeping some of the content private. They were first given to us as a Christmas gift many years ago. The game had an interesting journey before and after that day. Paul created some additional recordings in 2017 as a way to show Petscop gameplay to his friend. He created this account in order to upload those additional recordings in video format. He later passed ownership of the channel to us, but continued to record himself at our strong suggestion. Though he had issues with the arrangement, these have finally been settled. Please enjoy the recordings in Petscop. We do. And then there's that signature smiley face at the end there. This text is also displayed in the description of each of the new videos. The main thing I should note here is the weird tension between Paul and the Proprietors. Primarily, let's focus on the transition of the channel's ownership from Paul to the Proprietors. The channel update states that Paul, quote, passed ownership of the channel to us, end quote. And this is a fairly innocuous framing of the situation. However, I don't know about you, but I'm getting some malevolent vibes from the Proprietors. It is worth asking if this was a willful decision made on Paul's part, or if it was a choice made under some amount of duress. It's entirely possible that the Proprietors coerced Paul into transferring ownership of the channel, either through direct threats to his safety, or possibly through blackmail. We should also ask when exactly this transition took place. It's not entirely clear, but there are a few possible indications. For instance, the 5th video, uploaded on April 11, 2017, has a peculiar video description. It begins with the following statement. Hello folks, I guess this is for all of you now. It raises the question, what changed between video 4 and video 5? Could this be when the transition of ownership took place? The Proprietors state that Paul, quote, had issues with the arrangement, referring to the dynamic by which Paul records his Petscop experiences and sends them to the Proprietors, after which they publish select content. And when you think about it, it's entirely understandable why Paul would have issues with such an arrangement. After all, it seems to me that the Proprietors have all the power here. They determine what gets uploaded. At this point, I'm also operating under the assumption that it is the Proprietors who are carrying out the censorship that we see in the game. I stated as much in my 4th investigation video. The Proprietors state that Paul made additional recordings in 2017. This is a peculiar way to put it. Are there previous recordings that we haven't seen? In fairness, we really have no idea how long Paul has been playing this game. And as we'll see a bit later on in the video, there's something weird going on with Paul. He could very well be having lapses in his memory. Let's work through these 3 new videos with an understanding that this new channel description does not seem to bode well for Paul.
不够力吗？我还要第3个引擎
Let's get
哦！
started with the
别吧，
11th
哥
video.
哥！
At the very beginning of this
我
video,
搞2个引
Paul
擎
says，
搞
something
到已经
interesting.
快青筋爆炸了。Oh my god！ 不要了 ，No！ 看一下，不要2个。
But when I found my room, it made, well, I was shocked at first, but it made sense. Especially considering where I found the game in the first place.
Footnote. Here, Paul alludes to finding his own room in the game. Now, this is speculation, but I would venture to guess that the room he's referring to here is the one that contained the censored item in video 7. This would be consistent with my theory that the item censored in this room pertains to something personal to Paul himself. It could be an item which perhaps gives away his identity. Back to the video. Paul explains that he assumed the game would be connected in some way to the person he's speaking to. The very same person he's apparently been speaking to throughout these videos. The person it would seem he's made these videos for. Footnote. We still don't quite know this mystery person's identity, but in this video, Paul wonders aloud to himself about the last time he's seen them. Tellingly, he says, "When's the last time I saw any of you at all?" So, it could be that Paul is talking about someone from a group of estranged family members. This is highly speculative, but the way Paul is describing things, it almost sounds as though he could be referring to a cousin, perhaps. Someone he saw on a semi-regular basis on holidays like, say, just for instance, Christmas. So Paul would have seen this person a few times a year, at least until, that is, something happened that caused Paul's immediate family to have a falling out with his estranged relatives. Back to the video. Paul estimates that the last time he had seen these people was around 1999. He was a small child at the time. Paul seems to be attempting to perform some kind of elaborate series of movements in the New Maker plane. He explains that he's made a drawing. He says that the visual will help the person he's communicating with to understand the explanation. Paul's fairly confident that this series of movements will work, although it's not entirely clear yet what this is supposed to accomplish. Suddenly, a prompt comes up. It's similar to the ones that come up when Paul is interfacing with the tool. Strangely, Paul seems to know exactly what to do at this point in order to progress further.
Alright, so the way this works, I'm supposed to pass on this one.
The prompt disappears and you see a big wheel in the middle of the field. Paul circles around it in an elaborate sort of way, and the prompt reappears. He asks, "Where is house?" The wheel begins spinning, and Paul assumes that it is pointing in the direction he's supposed to go. Footnote. How does Paul know what to do here exactly? Well, keep in mind that we could very well be missing footage. It's entirely possible that this whole series of movements was demonstrated to him in some way. Perhaps, maybe through a demo sequence. Back to the video. Paul goes in the direction indicated, and he comes across a road. It's not quite what he expected, but he follows the road to the left and finds a sign. The sign reads, "This is a frozen house captured 3 times, exactly as it was." Paul explores the area and finds a house. This seems to be the house first seen on a picture in the second video. Paul goes up to the door and uses his green key. A prompt reads, "The key still works." It still works. Though you've unlocked the door, you can't open it. Recall that Paul's character can't open doors. Paul acknowledges that this is a reoccurring joke in the game. The video cuts to another point in time. Paul muses about a game mechanic that perplexes him. On the road, he's required to turn his joystick clockwise to go to the left, and counterclockwise to go to the right. He compares it to the saying, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, usually made in reference to tightening or loosening a screw when putting something together. He admits that this has always thrown him off, and he has to consciously think about it in order to perform the required task. The door opens, and Paul enters the house. Footnote. What made the door open? It's not entirely clear, but I think this in-game reference to our protagonist not being able to open doors, I think this might actually be a reference to Paul himself, a sort of inside joke amongst Paul's extended family. This could possibly relate to the coordination issue Paul admits to having with the whole righty-tighty, lefty-loosey thing. Back to the video. Paul explores the area, collecting gifts as he moves forward. Various figures appear, disappear, and reappear as he goes through the house. Footnote: these figures resemble people, but they're not animated in the same fashion as Paul. They're more akin to the figures that appear in the various bedrooms, the child figures that sit on the various beds generated from the child library system. A prompt displays lines of dialogue. The text is a purple color. It reads as follows: "Where have you been? Why were you gone for such a long time?" Now, listen to this. There's an audible murmur shortly after this line. As best I can gather, this soundbite is indiscernible, but I think it is possibly intended to mimic the ambient noises of the house, a television left running, perhaps. Another prompt appears. Is this a present? Who is it for? Paul examines the calendars on the wall next to the Christmas tree. Footnote: let's take a closer look at these calendars ourselves, shall we? Now, Paul correctly observes that these two calendars are for different years. Let's start with the calendar to the left. This one would appear to indicate the year 1997. Every day after Christmas is a darker shade than the rest of the month. There's a Christmas tree icon on Christmas Day. It's swaying back and forth. The first 10 days of November are shaded in green. Every day in June is highlighted except for the 2nd through the 4th. July, August, September, and October are shaded entirely in green. Weekends in March, April, and May are shaded in green as well. Weekends in February are highlighted except for Saturday the 1st and Sunday the 9th. Tuesday the 4th, Thursday the 6th, and Monday the 10th are also highlighted in green. Even days in January are highlighted. Note also that the 13th of June has a number of symbols that would appear to correspond to buttons on a PlayStation controller. But, alas, it's difficult to say. Take a look for yourself. I've turned up the contrast a bit. Now, let's look at the calendar to the right. This one would appear to indicate the year 2000. Unlike the previous instance, none of the contents are highlighted in green. Though, as with the previous calendar, every day after Christmas is darkened. If you recall, a previous channel update stated as follows: Rain gave this gift to us on Christmas.
Good to me, I guess.
2000. It was the single longest day of our lives. We were all certain he was dead. He had been missing since June 1997 and 2000. We're not as concerned about these things now. So, it would appear that there's a correlation here. Now, let's just take note of the oddity. Paul has collected a total of 365 pieces prior to looking at the calendar. Is this meant to represent one piece for each day of the year? Back to the video. Paul alludes to a conversation about a girl who went missing on June 5th and was found on November 10th. He has trouble remembering this event and suspects that he wasn't visiting so much when it occurred. This girl who purportedly went missing also happens to be the same age as Paul. She bears a striking resemblance to him if we're to believe Paul's account. We can possibly infer that Care is a representation of this girl. Another prompt appears.
你知道为什么我要播广播吗？因为这样的话，我才不会比较无聊。因为我现在我的饮料喝完了。
Paul wonders
I'm so upset. 现在哪里了？900公尺，快到了。
The camera zooms in on the television towards the front of the house. The game jumps back to Paul in the bathroom. Take note that there is a white block above the bathtub. The symbol on this block is identical to the symbol that scrolls across the screen in Randus and Wavy's room back in Even Care. Suddenly, it appears as though the game has started. The title screen appears, and then we get a shot of the tunnel scene in previous videos. The demo sign is flashing, indicating that Paul is perhaps not controlling the game at this point, though that's actually not entirely clear. The game takes us through a tunnel and down a path. A clock appears. It's set at 3 o'clock, but it's not clear whether that's AM or PM. The viewer approaches a large gray structure. As we go through the door, the screen cuts to Paul's avatar in a field, along with the figure we come to recognize as Marvin. The demo sign now flashes at the bottom of the screen.
我记得我已
Again,
经
it's not clear
鲨
what
鱼又
this is
回来
meant to
了。
indicate. The player walks up to Marvin, who is standing in front
You
of
are
a park
coming back
bench.
again.
Recall that we've previously seen a park
看一
bench
下我还有
depicted
剩多少
in the room with
Bruce
the
好
large
了，
cake.
看一下
There's a
啊，
flashing controller
大
cord
概
at the top of the
1、
screen
2、
along with the
3
text
只 Bruce
"B2
的量。
talk." This would seem to indicate that the player must use the controller to converse with Marvin. A pattern of PlayStation controller buttons appears above Marvin's head, and the word hello appears
公司
shortly
的2
thereafter.
分钟左右
Another，
差
pattern
不多，
appears
快
with the
到
word
了，
Paul
差一
with
点
2
点。
L's instead of a U, forming the sentence, hello Paul. The game apparently has a system in which certain patterns of buttons create words. Paul's avatar struggles, but he is eventually able to get out a greeting. Hello, he says. Marvin responds, funny, ha ha. After this, Paul's avatar follows Marvin into what would appear to be the school, first seen in the second video. A more detailed and somewhat grotesque-looking version of Marvin's face appears during the loading screen. Take a look for yourself. Inside the school, we are given more of a second-person perspective, with Paul's avatar facing away from us. There's a brick frame around the display.
我
A
会需要
small
超级
green
多木
tool-shaped
板
object
的
is
未来的
displayed
话
to the right of Paul's
超
avatar.
多木板，
Paul
我
walks
需
through
要
the
超
school,
级多
and the
木
game
板。
glitches as he moves
嘿
to
嘿
the
嘿
right.
嘿嘿嘿
Before
嘿
it
嘿
comes
嘿，要
through
撞
the
山
brick
了！
frame. Paul collects pieces, but they don't actually disappear as he picks them up. It would appear that this is a very hastily designed level. There's an abrupt cut to black. It's not clear whether the level has restarted or there's been a post-gameplay edit. Again, the floor
What the hell?
passes through the brick
它
frame
是在
as
指
the
这个岛
player
啊？
traverses the school. This time, the screen darkens, and it appears as though the player has control over the green tool. It moves across the screen. Eventually, it
它是在
becomes
指
clear
这个
that
岛
this
哎
is a particular mode of
是哎，
gameplay. The
哇
player continues onward
哇，好
and
酷
comes
哦！
across a locker with a combination lock
酷
and patch. The player attempts to
对，
manipulate
我
the
把
lock,
木板
and
全
the
部
sound
收起
plays
来。
indicating that
对
it
对
cannot
对
be opened so
弓
easily.
箭好
The
像不太
combination
够
lock appears larger on the screen, and the player messes around with it. The tool begins moving and starts manipulating the lock. The screen cuts back to Paul at the house. The very same jingle plays as the camera zooms in on the television again. Paul enters the bathroom, but this time the white block is suspiciously absent, along with the ramp leading up to the tub. Paul says, that was an experience. Footnote.
上
It's
去
unclear
快！
what has just transpired.
400公，哎，
but
对，
there's
真的是
something
指这个
strange
岛
going on here.
Shit！
Paul notices that the white block is
我刚
missing.
刚还以为要
It
撞
sounds
山
a
了，
bit
不对，就是在
disorienting.
指这边。
Has Paul lost time?
哦，好
perhaps?
吧，
Has the
既
game
然
been
你说的
edited
是
in a
哦，
tricky sort of way? How much
我
time
讨
has
厌这种
passed
感觉，
since the
我
last
感
time
觉
Paul
岛
was
上
in
会有
this
很多
bathroom?
杂七
It
杂
could be
八的
that
东
Paul
西。
is experiencing disassociative amnesia,
啊
which just
shit
so happens to be a symptom of people
我们的
coping
船又被
with
啃掉一块，
PTSD.
你
Has
这
Paul
超级巴士
experienced
阿姨。
trauma in his life? We
好
can't
像
say for sure, but based on the ominous subtext of this game, it's not out of the question to
哎，
speculate
对啊，
along these
有一
lines.
点
If this
人
is
造
the
建
case,
筑的
it's
痕
worth
迹。
considering the possibility that something in the game is
这样好像
triggering
不止一
Paul's
点人造建筑
disassociative
啊，
state,
这是这个，
something that
我
reminds
也
him
不知道
of a
该怎
traumatic
么形容。
experience. Back to the video.
不是
Paul goes back
他
into
看
the
起来
main
好
part
像
of the
很屌，
house, and the Christmas tree
但我
is
不知道
missing.
他想要
There
表
are
达
a
的是
few
什
other
么。
noticeable differences
Shit.
as well. There's a bucket in the middle of the room. Paul's able to move it around. Note also that there's only one calendar on the
不
wall.
过我有
There's
个
also no
有个问题
figures
就是
appearing
我
and
不太确
disappearing
定
in this scene,
未来
unlike before.
这
Paul
实
walks
况
up
要
to the
要怎么
corkboard
继
with
续
a
延
couple of
续下
notes
去？
attached to it. The first note reads as follows. My husband may come here after 6 p.m. Please stay overnight if you can. Thank you so much. And then there's a large black dot with a hole in the middle, similar to the one we saw during the
那
trippy
边好像
interlude
过
in
不
video
去
6. Paul checks out the
呢，
calendar
感觉
again,
好像
and
不行
this
哎，
time
我
June
们
is
大
the
要
first
大回
month to
转
come
一
up.
下。
Again, it would appear that this calendar is from 1997. The first is highlighted in green, and every day after the 5th is darkened.
哦 shit！
The number 5
哦
is，
转得
animated,
过去吗？
seemingly
啊，
as though
转
to
不过
mark
去
the
啊！
5th as a significant day.
转到
Footnote.
底，
Keep in mind what the sign in the
然后
front of the house says. This is a
直
frozen
接
house captured
往外
3
拉。
times exactly as it was. Based on this statement, we can
Holy
possibly
shit.
infer that
不
the
行不行
different
不行
states of the house
哦，
represent
不行不行
different time periods.
哦，不行不
This
行，
instance would appear to indicate the year 1997 since only one calendar is present. Paul examines some items in the bottom left corner of the room, but it's not clear what these things are. There appear to be a set of interlocking green chains. They're vibrating rapidly. Paul enters a bedroom. To his surprise, Care is sitting at the foot of the bed. She's surrounded by a transparent box which prevents Paul from getting close to her. An AC unit blocks the window above her. Note that the clock on the wall indicates that the time is 6:10. Footnote. Recall the note in the front room. It said, "My husband may come here after 6 p.m. The note implores the reader to stay at the house. This is most plausibly read as a plea for help. In this portion of the game, Care has some kind of force field surrounding her. It stands to reason that this represents an order of protection. Of course, if there are no police officers around it, enforce the order of protection, it doesn't do much good. It's essentially symbolic, hence the visual representation of a force field here. Back to the game. Every so often,
no,
turns blue and begins shaking for a
Stay off my ship,
Paul
you
expresses
motherfucker.
confusion. At around the 19-minute mark, the game cuts and it appears as though some time has passed. If we are to believe the clock, it's been a few minutes. Paul exits the house and there's an enigmatic loading screen. Footnote. I've messed with this image a bit, and as you can see, it appears to be a room with a chair in it. There's not much else discernible here as far as I can gather. Paul walks around the house to see if there's anything else to be done. He then goes back into the house to see if there's anything he's missed. Again, he explores.
开到一半吧，还是把游戏声音关小声一点。
Paul enters the small room to the left, presumably a closet, and the door closes behind it. And remember, Paul can't open doors. Paul waits around. Suddenly, the AC unit crashes to the floor, and Marvin appears. He obtains Care and abruptly leaves. A prompt reads, Care has left the room. Footnote. Recall that in video 6, Marvin asks, "Where is my house?" Did Paul lead Marvin to his house? The door opens and the room reverts back to its former state, with Care still sitting on the foot of the bed. Paul goes back into the main room and briefly sees Marvin again. Paul attempts to look for Marvin, then he goes outside and sees a ladder leading up to Care's bedroom. Climbs the ladder, enters a room, and catches her, just as Marvin previously did. Paul goes to the start menu. There's a message.
Hold your fucking phone.
Paul reads Care's description. When the emergency
I need time. One person is too cocky for fucking this shit.
When Care A
No.
goes missing, she goes missing forever. My brother didn't want us to find him because he knew we were all looking for Michael A. I'm back. This is my present for you. I started in 1996 for Marvin. If you think they're worth any effort, see if you can save Care B or Care NLM. Care B is in the school, of course. Fuck you all and fuck me as well.
不过我有个问题，这个岛上会有蜜蜂吗？我有点想要抓蜜蜂，有点想要抓蜜蜂，在不要死的前提下。
Paul checks the bathroom but finds nothing. The screen cuts and we're back in the school. The demo sign flashes across the top of the screen. There's a short loading screen. It depicts a piano with a PlayStation controller attached to the top of it. The keys appear to have been stripped off. The player enters a classroom. Marvin stands near a teacher's desk. Play music for baby, he says. She will become Melody. A pyramid-shaped object appears. The player picks it up. Thanks, the player says. The player begins manipulating the object, playing a series of notes. Lovely, Marvin says.
终于要上岸了，是任务的其中一个海岸。
as a home icon. When the player goes off key, we no longer see the root note depicted on the board. Marvin says she tripped and fell and is lost. The player continues to play out of key. Stop, Marvin says. Sorry, says the player. Marvin says, Tiara plays bad music too. Do it right next time. The player says, sad. Marvin responds, okay, Paul. And that's the end of video 11.
先做一个出来，有就有，没有就没有。 然后很重要一点，先睡到早上。
Uploaded on January 4th, 2018. It begins with a demo sequence in which the player explores Quitter's room. After a short time, a figure appears. It's an exact copy of Paul's avatar, except there's a large red triangle shape over the face. As with previous instances in Quitter's room, this figure mirrors the player's actions. The player exits Quitter's room and begins to collect pieces as they explore the area. Strangely, the figure with the red triangle over its face follows the player outside and appears to merge with them. Take a look for yourself. Note also that the piece count begins at 0. We can possibly infer from this that we are witnessing one of the player's first experiences with this game, or perhaps the start of a new session. A prompt comes up. Hi Belle, you're free. I'll left these messages for you to look at in case you were ever rescued. So, while you walk around, looking for something to do, I'll come up periodically. When the messages run out, I'll be out of your hair forever and ever. The player walks around a narrow pathway, and the video cuts to another point in time. The player is viewing Michael Hammond's grave. Another prompt appears. You've apparently been running Petscop nonstop 533,758,221 seconds, or 153,822 hours. That looks dubious to me. What do you think? The player continues to explore the area. Footnote. 153,822 hours is approximately 17 and a half years. This would appear to indicate that the game was started sometime in the middle of the year 2000, assuming that the time of the video's release at least somewhat adheres to the time of its recording. Back to the video. Are you still sitting on a chair? Can you still look around the room? Is there still a room? This is the child library. You're not family, so I didn't add your traits to the face system. That means I didn't add your eyes, your eyebrows, or your nose. The player goes to the new maker plane and sees Marvin standing in a field. A prompt reads, "Don't get lost." Marvin begins moving in an elaborate fashion. The player continues exploring the area. Again, the scene cuts and it appears as though some time has passed. Happy birthday, Belle. I'm calling you Belle because that's who you are. You might be confused as to what happened. I was overeating before I started calling you
我忘记了。
prematurely.
算了，多一个 hot potato 也可以。
The menu for you, still unused now. Then I put you inside the machine and started playing Straczynski's Septet on the needles. I played it wrong, but that would have been okay. If you hadn't given up halfway, you would be Tiara. This is not what happened, and now I'm gone. After this, the player stands around for a while. They open the start menu, and the video abruptly ends. Though, if you freeze the frame here, you'll notice something interesting. There's no longer an option to quit the game. The 13th video was published on March 11, 2018, the one-year anniversary of the channel's creation. The video begins with what appears to be a demo sequence, though strangely enough, Paul speaks as though he's playing.
Oh shit! 不好意思，我刚刚不小心拍到我的麦克风。Shit!
Paul moves
Sorry.
from the house to the road. There's a blue tool-shaped object to the left. It moves along with Paul as he pushes the bucket. Paul passes through a large arc, and the object rises up. Paul figures out that the bucket can be positioned directly under the object, such that when he walks away, the bucket will catch it. Note also that there is a large white block in this area with a pattern that is identical to the one that scrolls across the screen in Rona's room. Paul returns to the house with the object and pushes it towards the bundle of objects in the lower left-hand corner of the room. The object rises up out of the bucket and joins the items on the table.
不过他们说的 reactor 是那个不是啊，那是深海探测器而已。Warning: beyond this point, no loitering, no littering. Camera when flash. Okay. 简单的说，就是有点像游乐公园。 Non-park risk must be turned off. 有熊欸。
Here in this room, Paul's
好
recent
哦
experience with the bucket
OK
in the house has given him
Very
an
good.
idea. He pushes the bucket into
而且这些树
Ron's
不能砍，
He places the
我们
bucket
砍了，
on
我们能
the
砍的只
and
有棕榈
subsequently
树而已，
catches it. He reads his new pet's description.
非常好。
Rona is Toneth's baby half-brother. Because he's younger, he gets to learn from all of Toneth's mistakes. That's why he always looks both ways. He doesn't get it.
而且其实重点，我发现有一个技巧可以那个，
Recall that in Toneth's description, it states that he quote
有一个技巧可以打熊。
Based on the information in Rona's description, we can infer that Toneth, or whoever Toneth represents in the real
Wild
world,
berry.
was in fact hit by a vehicle.
啊，
Roneth,
那
the
5个
younger
也
sibling,
没，
has learned to look both
可以
ways
干
before
啥小？
crossing the street due to this very incident.
Simple.
He's learned from the experiences
先
of
往
his
上
older
再说，
brother.
往上走，
Interestingly enough,
往
Roneth
上
looks
走比较
both
重要。
ways in the game animation itself.
管他。
Note again that there's no longer an option to quit the game. The start menu indicates that this is indeed a demo recording. The screen
好，
cuts
如果
and
你
Paul
有人在好奇背景在播什么的话，在播那个 Pescop 的 Analyze 影片。
You have seen everything in the game so far, but there will obviously be more. It's a growing organism. Your controller inputs will be useful.
不过我不知道会不会被 YouTube copy strike 的，因为我基本上就是拿别人的东西盗来直播混死这样。Holy shit! Okay. No, please. Play.
3 quick tones, 3 long tones, and then 3 quick tones again. Let's take a listen to Paul's supposed knocking. I'd say this is not definitive, but it is plausible. There are a series of knocking sounds, and it could be an SOS signal executed somewhat imperfectly, which would make sense if Paul is in a perturbed state.
Okay.
This prompt reads, leave the PlayStation on.
我没有想过会直接这么直接的遇到，这14根键，大概还可以再刷2只。
And that's the end of video 13.
但我不知道一个岛上会有多少只熊。我没有预想到会这么刺激。哎，没。
Wow. So there are quite a few things we can deduce from the information presented in these new videos. Let's start with a certain revelation. In video 12, the designer, presumably Rainer, states that he didn't put those features in the child library system because she's not family.
哦，而且它是出现在右上角。代表是特殊收集物了。我要在这个整个岛上收集5个 Wild Berry。哦，开玩笑。然后怎么找到5个 Wild Berry， 同时还要玩游戏呢？在跟我公差小？游戏呀，你在跟我干嘛？在跟我耍帅吗？啊？
And as you might recall, the result of this combination was the room that contained the censored item. In video 11, Paul notes that he previously found his room in the game. As you know, I believe the room with the censored item is meant to be Paul's room. Now, if this is in fact Paul's room, it stands to reason that his features, the combination of Pierre's face and Michael's eyebrows, are represented in the so-called child library system. So Paul is related to Rainer, Michael, and Care.
而这很明显就是逼着你要去找所有的东西，然后特别是你有一个人，然后你带的东西又不够。
Had been censored to keep Paul's identity private. In order for that to be the case, the censored item must be something that is oddly specific to Paul, something that could theoretically identify him, or at least narrow down his identity. I believe that the proprietors are keeping Paul's identity a secret on the basis that he continues playing the game and making videos. They're holding it over his head, and it's possible they're making other demands as well. Now, why wouldn't Paul want his identity revealed? Well, it could be any number of reasons. It is potentially the case that Paul himself can be implicated in whatever crimes the proprietors are currently involved in. Not that he's necessarily
原来这边就是采蜜蜂的地方，
might just be in a
就这样
situation where they can
没了。
essentially frame him,
好，
for the proprietors to leak his
中了。
information, particularly his
在我完全没有想到的时候，就突然喷出这
there
个
would
东
be
西。
legal ramifications
Okay.
for Paul. If that's the case,
Absolutely
it makes
fine.
sense
Absolutely
to
good.
comply with the
Really
proprietor's
good.
demand.
Very
This
good.
is contingent
I will
on
love it
Paul
very
not
much.
knowing the identity of the proprietors, or at least not being able to connect them to the situation. Otherwise, he could just turn them in as well. Towards the end of video
哦，
13,
下面好像还有
Tom
东
tells
西
us。that Pet Scout, the game, is, quote,
关系，先沿着路下去，我们可以顺
Allow me to present a few
啊 you
possible
son of a
explanations.
bitch！
Now, a lot of
一
people are interpreting this phrase
二
growing organism in
啊
a
有没有
foreboding, perhaps even supernatural way, and I totally
呃
understand the urge to do
I
so.
roll
Yeah, it could be
Rosa
that on a
is
game
the
is
mostly
systematic,
right.
consuming people,
All
possessing them,
is
causing them
something
to commit
expecting
heinous
wrong
acts,
the near.
eventually trapping their essence in the game itself. It could very well be that the
Linda
story is
make
taking that
the
turn,
something
but at
the
this point,
rule
I'm
unless to.
agnostic on the issue. Let's consider an alternative
看起来很奇
explanation.
怪
It could be that Pet Scout is
没什么
designed
逻
in
辑
a
的文字
recursive manner such that the actions
不过看起来
of
是
players
他们
are
好像
integrated
在这个
into
岛
the
上
game
定了一
itself.
些
We
规
have
则
no way of knowing how much
就是
information the game really takes in, but if we're to believe the
但实际
message
上我
in
看不出来他
video
们定了什么
13,
规
it's
则，
recording the
只
controller
基于
inputs.
哪个的
Could
东
be
东
that the，
那我们
players
就跟着
whose
干就
names
对了。
previously
我
entered
想说，
become
好，没问题
characters
，OK。
later on, when
一
some
送
other
流。
player starts a new game. This is by no means a supernatural explanation. It requires no magic, no science fiction, no malevolent force at the heart of the game. All it requires is some savvy programming. There would of course be limits to this, namely the game's memory. But here's a thought. Perhaps the game extends beyond the limits of the physical PS1. Perhaps the logic of the game extends into the real world inhabited by Paul. Or rather, the game is being carried out in literal terms by the proprietors in the real world. Previously, I've identified two major themes in Pet Scout.
虽然说我现在身上的 shit 有点多，真的有点想要回去船上把东西存一存，再继续冒险。
Synchronicity.
Fuck it.
This synchronicity theme plays out in a number of ways. Many people have
Maybe
pointed
you'll
out
lose
the
it.
various and really quite striking sorts of congruities that occur between select portions of the
我们
gameplay.
做得
in the
到。
videos. This synchronous aspect of the work might be best understood, I think, as a repetition
我们
of
做得
certain
到。
toxic
我
patterns,
相
patterns
信。
which are unwittingly replicated by Paul due to a larger underlying system of perverse
Stop.
incentives at play. Recall that different portions of the game are correlated with one another through the use of various symbols. For example, Quitter's room is associated with the room in Even Care containing the pet known as Amber. So too are these portions analogous in other, more subtle ways. For instance, to access
look
the
at
left
me.
side of Quitter's room,
I'm in the
it requires Paul
genius.
to do something similar
I'm
to what he
the
did when he
genius.
caught Amber. I talk about this in my third
Oh shit,
investigation
can hate
video,
him. Oh.
but I think it bears repeating because this is some next level puzzle crafting right here. Paul caught Amber by locking himself into her enclosure, the prison cell on the left-hand side of the room. This
先
prompted
探
Amber to
索
jump back
表
over
面
to her side of the
再
cell,
探索
allowing
那
Paul
种
to catch her. Paul then exited the cell through an unseen passageway.
特别是晚上有个
In
好
video 10,
处
Paul
可以
finds
捡的
himself
东西
stuck
都
in
会
Even
发亮
Care after finagling a bit with one of the levers in Amber's room. Presumably, it's this same lever that opens the door leading to the left side of Quitter's room. So he's gotten access to that side of the room, but there's a problem. The mechanism also happens to lock Paul in Even Care. So it is required of Paul to crash the game in order to return to the lower level. He's able to save his progress, his actions in Even Care, using the panic save function.
希望不要有蜜蜂在附近绕，我怕他们会叮我。所以我比较担心。不过看他们在旁边飞来飞去，不是蛮疗愈的。某方面啊哈，你看，某方面来说是挺疗愈。然后已经4个了，然后再找到1个，我们就golden了。可是他说是要4个还是要6个？我的记忆力有点不好。哎，6个，好，有就捡，有就捡，管他个屁话，有就捡啊。可是真的好黑哦，哪边才是上去的路
？Now, recall this idea that the proprietors are carrying out the logic of the game in the real world. If this is in fact the case,
有时候其实玩晚上的游戏，我会有点紧啊，不对，不是那个紧张。You know my idea？ 紧张，真的会有点。看起来过得风生水起啊，是在跟我。What the hell? 4 and 3. Third is Gamba and fine, not angry. 不知道第几天。日记第6页。哦，所以有人还在这边呢，有人还在这边写日记。
Now, we're going to get into some metaphysical territory here, so bear with me. Petscop works through a gradual process of conditioning.
1到3个 relay activate。OK， 我们要找到另外2个中继站。不过这边不可以给我睡一下吗？我真的有点想要这边躺一下到白天。我不喜欢晚上，晚上我真的是看不到小啦。Fuel pipe useful for transport biofuel between different machines.
If this theory holds true, it would seem that the game has been systematically integrating the actions of various people, such that when they play the game, they cannot return to the real world, not in a physical sense, but in an emotional and intellectual sense.
然后根据我们现在的地方的话，我们应该是在外间岛上面，就是最外围。我们刚经过那个中间有个桥要过去的地方，所以我们的船是在我们正对面。所以我们我们不是走了，我们是切了一整个大西瓜回来。好吧，没有差，反正就沿着原路绕回去，大不了嘛。我们就直接从断崖塞给它直跳下去，直接回到船上啊。然后如果有观众想要来救我的，欢迎联络我，我非常乐意。有人要上线来救我，我会非常的 happy。
I believe it is the case that Paul is still playing Petscop, in his own mind at least. Now, keep in mind that the game has conditioned Paul to do some pretty questionable things. He's kept the game on despite warning signs that it's still causing harm to someone, and in video 11, Paul repeated Marvin's actions, essentially kidnapping the character known as Care A. The game has desensitized Paul to certain morally dubious actions, and now it's blurring the line between the game and reality itself. That is a troublesome combination, if you ask me. Back in video 6, Paul speculates that the game is trying to make it seem like it's inhabited by an entity, but he expresses skepticism at the idea. He says that in order for this to be true, a real-time back and forth would be required. Well, I think you might know where I'm going with this. Is this the real-time back and forth Paul was looking for? It's difficult to say. Marvin's responses are rudimentary, and it's entirely possible that they're pre-programmed. Given the information we currently have available, there's no definitive evidence that the game is hosting an entity, as
Paul calls it.
But let's try and think
有
about
看
this
到
on a metaphoric
香
level.
菇，
Marvin employs a mode of communication by which certain buttons on the
哦，好
PlayStation
多
are
香菇哦，
relayed into
香菇。
symbols. In response, the
是，
player learns
然后
the
糟糕，我没
language
带
of
铲子出门
his，or her
不然
abuser,
真的是
and
很
they
多的
begin
泥
to
土。
use it as well. As
这
such,
些泥
the
土可以
player
拿来做
becomes
很
further
多事情。
entrenched in the logic of the game. And, well, it
稍
would
微
be an
记一下这，
understatement
稍微
at this
记一
point
下
to
这个
say
地
that
点
the
哈，
logic
有
presented
机
is
会我
really
们
kind
回
of
来，
twisted. I think that's been
我们
pretty
回来再慢
firmly
慢搜啊。
established. In a metaphorical sense, we can speculate that
我们
this is
现
meant
在
to
是绕
represent
着
the tragic and
外
cyclical
围跑，
nature of
内缘
abuse.
跑嘛，
It's an
然
issue
后
of
往这
patterns
边跑，
repeating
应该就
themselves
可以回
across
到我们原本的
generations.
地方。
But let's think
哎，不
critically
对，
about
我
this
们的地方在
because
这
it is
边，
not
它这个
inevitable
地方
that
是
the
往另外
abused
一头去，
becomes the abuser.
不确定会不会到我
Possible
们
to
同
break
样
that
的海岸，
pattern. People have
不
done
确
that. We
定，
don't have to
会有点
accept
担心。
the premises upon which this
啊，
framework
这
is
是
built.
另外一个
There
峡
are
岸，
other ways to conceive of things
对，
like
这是另外
trauma,
一个峡岸，
abuse, etc.
不是这一头，
Categorize people
不能走
in the
这一头，
manner depicted in Pet
这一
Scout
边是
to
此路
think
不同
of
的
a
那种。
person in terms of these various forms, A, B, and NLM. This essentially works to
而且我的弓快断
it
了，
reduces them.
我的天！而且我没有多的海藻，哎，我有多的海藻，可是我还没有来得及烧。
I think whatever the case with respect to
我的葡萄藤免疫大概只剩
he has
下一
nonetheless
个
accepted the
一个
terms of Marvin's
啊！现在马上就重
This
生
is，evident based on
在
the
跟我
framework
fucking
of
开
the
玩
game
笑。
itself. One of the themes of the work is the problem of uncovering and perhaps even coming to terms with
没
the
看到
truth
我就
in
不
the
会主动发
aftermath of traumatic events. It serves as a meditation on the sorts of challenges one might face.
The obstacles that prevent one from moving forward after these sorts of events.
Also, I think the work is a
快
critical
回船
reflection on
上，
how
要
society
死啦！
perceives those who have experienced
再不
trauma.
回船上
We
会被自
operate
己
under
渴
the
死，
assumption that Rainer is the creator of the game. It
会
logically
被自
follows
己
that
渴
the
死，
way things are
会
categorized
死
in the game are。
我不知
indications
道
of
这边的
Rainer's
这边的
mental
熊重
state.
生，
His attitudes
小
are
心为上。
implicit within the game's
仔细
design.
看看，
Thus,
没
this
熊，
framework
很好，
forms a lasting
非常好，
impression on players.
喜
It
欢。
creates a self-fulfilling prophecy of sorts. Rainer is continually depicted with an underlying sort of pessimism, a sense that things are
对，
hopelessly
熊是在
unfixable.
上，
In the description for Tonith, Rainer says, "When that dog wags its tail and appears happy, it's not real." So he can't even bring himself to believe that a dog is capable of momentary joy.
啊
Why
，Yeah，
is Rainer like this?
Yeah.
Well, there are a number of
Yeah.
textual clues
哥哥
that
别
could provide some insight. Primarily, I think there are a number of indications that Rainer hasn't had a great life. In Care A's description, Rainer insinuates that he is Michael A's brother. We can infer that Rainer is talking about Michael Hammond, the name on the grave in video 2. We can also possibly infer that Rainer's description of Ronith is a thinly veiled reference to Michael, based on the sibling dynamic that's laid out here. As such, it follows that Rainer's description of a wounded dog is a thinly veiled reference to himself. That's telling in the larger context of the narrative. Keep in mind that
捡不到就算
assuming
了。
Rainer is in fact the designer of Pet Scout, the framing of events is all through his perceptual lens, if that makes sense. For example, this framework by which Rainer categorizes victims in A,
根
B,
据
and
耐久度
NLM
应该剩
forms,
2发。
this is a construct of Rainer's making. This is the case whatever his intentions may be. It could be that Rainer has created the game in an effort to expose a crime
成
or
就
a
成，不
series of
成就
crimes.
算了。
But even if Rainer intended for this game to serve as an expose of sorts, it is
而
nonetheless
且我
the
们路
case that
上
the
可以顺
proprietors
便到
have
那个
co-opted the game
需要
for their
按
own
压榨蓝
malicious
美的
purposes.
压榨演员
That's
的
my
地方
working，theory
啊，这个
anyway.
地方。
They're able to do so because Rainer seems to have internalized the language of these would-be criminals. As such, he is perpetuating a harmful framework that serves to benefit the proprietors. Now, categories are not intrinsically harmful. Quite often, they're useful and
唉，
beneficial to
好吧
society at large.
我也许不该那么
Obviously,
cocky
from a medical standpoint,
唉，
medications can treat people with high blood pressure. But oftentimes,
Well.
historically speaking, putting
Ah.
people into categories has been harmful to those outside the bounds of what we consider normal. The way we tend to describe and moralize certain differences
哦
has，
美
been
术箱带的
harmful.
东西基
Where
本
we
上
draw
全
the
没
line
了，
matters,
还要
and
重
how
新
we
再
use
弄。
language matters. And perhaps we should think twice about the way we use language. After all, language
啊，
itself
好
is
吧
an，
没关系啊，
interpretation.
今天先这样，
These things are
我
subject
等一
to
下也
debate,
要出
and
门
that
了。
should not be conflated with an attempt to
Bye
debate the
bye.
merits of objective claims. Doing so only begs the
Whoa.
question. The same is true when it comes to the designing of systems, such as that of, say, for instance, video games. Thomas